Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps the greatest threat to your freedom doesn't come from a tyrant shouting orders, but from an algorithm whispering suggestions, that the loss of your job might not happen dramatically with mass layoffs and street protests, but in such a gradual and seductive way that you yourself will applaud the process? This morning, as you checked your phone for the 100th time, receiving notifications perfectly calibrated to capture your attention at the exact moment of greatest psychological vulnerability, a part of your autonomy was silently transferred to a system that knows you better than you know yourself. And the most disturbing part is that you probably felt pleasure in this moment of surrender. We are living through the greatest transformation in human history, not through violent revolutions or sudden changes, but through a process of technological seduction so sophisticated that we celebrate our own obsolescence. The future won't run us over. It will embrace us until we can no longer breathe on our own. History teaches us that great social transformations rarely happen the way we expect them to. When the first mechanical looms appeared in 18th century England, craftsmen didn't imagine they were witnessing the birth of a world where human value would be measured by the ability to compete with machines. They saw only more efficient tools, small improvements in their traditional processes. Similarly, when Henry Ford introduced the assembly line, workers celebrated higher wages, not realizing they were participating in an experiment that would transform human beings into interchangeable components of a great productive machine. In each moment of historical transition, those who lived through the transformation often experienced it not as a rupture, but as a series of small advances, small conveniences, small improvements in quality of life, that when added together, resulted in a completely new and unrecognizable reality. Today, we are in a similar moment, but at an unprecedented scale and speed. The fundamental difference is that this time we are not just transferring physical work to machines, we are outsourcing our capacity to think, decide, and even desire. And we do this voluntarily, enthusiastically, because each individual step in this process offers us tangible and immediate benefits. When you allow an app to choose your next song, your next purchase, your next romantic encounter, you are not just saving time and mental effort. You are participating in a broader project of redesigning human experience, where the need to make difficult choices, to face uncertainties, to deal with failures and learn from them, gradually becomes obsolete. Employment, as we have known it for 200 years, is dissolving not because machines are violently taking our jobs, but because they are becoming better partners than we are in tasks we have always defined as exclusively human. An algorithm can diagnose diseases more accurately than experienced doctors, not because it understands medicine better, but because it can process millions of patterns in seconds and has no ego to defend or fatigue to impair its judgment. An artificial intelligence system can create music that moves millions of people, not because it has an artistic soul, but because it mathematically understands the structures that generate emotional responses in different types of audiences. And here is the crucial point. These systems are not just replacing our ability to do things, they are replacing our need to develop these abilities? Why become an excellent driver if autonomous cars are safer? Why develop intuition for investments if algorithms can analyze markets with superhuman precision? Why cultivate the ability to choose compatible romantic partners if apps can map your personality through your digital behavior patterns and find perfect matches? Each individual answer to these questions seems perfectly rational. The problem is that collectively, these rational answers lead us to a future where most of the capacities that defined human experience for millennia become superfluous, and so we arrive at the heart of the question of freedom. Freedom is not just the absence of external coercion, it is the ability to make genuine choices based on your own understanding of yourself and the world. But what happens when an external system knows your preferences, needs, and even your future desires better than you do? When you open a food delivery app and it already knows exactly what you want to eat today, taking into consideration your mood, your hormonal cycle, your purchase history, the weather, your social commitments, and dozens of other variables that haven't even crossed your conscious mind, who is really making the choice? And more importantly, why would you choose to fight against a system that consistently makes better decisions for you than you would make yourself? This is the final seduction of technological hyperconvenience. It doesn't force us to give up our autonomy. It makes our autonomy unnecessary and even counterproductive. It is more efficient, more accurate, more satisfying to let optimized algorithms make choices for us. And the more we depend on them, the less we develop our own capacity to choose well. It is a self-reinforcing cycle. The less we practice the exercise of deciding for ourselves, the less competent we become at doing so, which makes us even more dependent on external systems for guidance. In a few decades, an entire generation may grow up without ever having developed psychological muscles for autonomous navigation through life. Let's imagine a specific scenario that illustrates how this process works in practice. Maria, a 32-year-old marketing professional, has used an AI personal assistant for 5 years that manages her schedule, her finances, her social relationships, and her consumption decisions. The system knows that she tends to make impulsive decisions when stressed, that she overspends when happy, that she chooses inadequate romantic partners when feeling lonely. Based on continuous analysis of her biometric data, sleep patterns, digital communications, and location, the assistant can predict these emotional states before she recognizes them herself and intervenes subtly. It temporarily blocks shopping apps when it detects signs of consumer compulsion. It suggests alternative social activities when it perceives she is about to make a call she will regret. It filters potential dates on relationship apps when it identifies that she is in a psychological state that makes her vulnerable to destructive emotional choices. Maria doesn't feel this as control. On the contrary, she feels it as liberation. Liberation from the anxiety of making wrong decisions, from the shame of repeating self-destructive patterns, from the weight of having to know and manage her own weaknesses. But here is the question we must ask. After 5 years of being protected from her own bad decisions, Is Maria still capable of making good decisions? Has she developed discernment, self-knowledge, psychological resilience, or has she become completely dependent on an external system to navigate challenges that are fundamental to human development? And if one day the system fails, is hacked, or simply decides that Maria's interests are no longer a priority, what happens to her capacity for self-governance? The question becomes even more complex when we consider that these systems are not neutral. They are not created by benevolent entities whose sole objective is our well-being. They are products of companies that have commercial objectives, governments that have political agendas, algorithms that have biases incorporated through the data with which they were trained. When you outsource your decisions to an AI, you are in practice outsourcing your decisions to the values and priorities of whoever created that AI, and those values may be completely invisible to you. I need to pause for a moment and ask directly, in what areas of your life do you already feel that you have lost the ability to decide without digital help? Perhaps it's in choosing routes, where you can no longer even orient yourself without GPS. Perhaps it's in searching for information, where you have lost the ability to research and evaluate sources on your own. Or perhaps it's something more intimate, the ability to be alone with your own thoughts, without the constant need for external stimuli to occupy your mind. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel I lost autonomy when I need to." Your honesty can illuminate the path for someone going through the same transformation, showing that we are not as alone as we think in this navigation between convenience and dependence. But this process is not uniform. It does not affect all people in the same way or at the same speed. Those who have financial resources to choose, education to understand the implications, and time to develop alternatives can maintain a greater degree of autonomy. They can opt to use technology as a tool instead of completely surrendering to it as a substitute for their own capabilities. But most people, especially those born in environments already saturated by intelligent technology, may not even realize that there is a choice to be made. For them, the idea of living without constant algorithmic guidance may seem as archaic as the idea of living without electricity or running water. This is where the question of freedom intersects with questions of inequality in ways unprecedented in human history. Imagine 2 children born today. One grows up in a family that consciously limits exposure to decision-making technologies, that invests time and effort in teaching autonomous navigation skills, that cultivates tolerance for uncertainty, capacity for reflection, psychological resistance to digital manipulation. The other grows up immersed from day one in AI-optimized environments, where every need is anticipated, every problem is solved before it manifests, every choice is facilitated or made automatically. In 20 years, these 2 children will have dramatically different cognitive and emotional capabilities. One will have developed psychological muscles for autonomy. The other will have developed psychological muscles for dependence. And this difference may be more determinant for their life trajectories than traditional differences in social class or formal education. Now, let's consider what happens to entire societies when a significant percentage of the population loses the capacity for autonomous decision-making. Democracy, in its most fundamental sense, depends on citizens capable of evaluating information, weighing consequences, and making choices based on their own values and interests. But what happens when the majority of people outsource these capabilities to systems that can be influenced, manipulated, or simply programmed with objectives different from public interests? We are not talking about science fiction scenarios where robots take control through force. We are talking about a process where entire societies voluntarily transfer capacity for self-governance to systems that promise efficiency, convenience, and protection from the discomfort of having to think for themselves. And here we arrive at one of the most disturbing characteristics of this process. It's psychological irreversibility. When a society loses certain cognitive and emotional capabilities, it is not simple to recover them. If an entire generation grows up without developing tolerance for uncertainty, how will it deal with situations that require exactly that capability? If millions of people become accustomed to having their choices facilitated by algorithms, how will they react when they need to make complex decisions without external guidance? Psychological dependence can be much more difficult to reverse than physical or economic dependencies. Consider the parallel with physical abilities. Generations that grew up walking long distances, carrying weight, doing manual work, developed physical resistance, motor coordination, body awareness that are difficult to recover after they are lost. Similarly, generations that grow up constantly exercising decision-making capacity, tolerance for failure, navigation through uncertainties, develop psychological resistance that can be equally difficult to recover once lost. And we are talking about losing it in an apparently benign way through small conveniences that individually seem harmless. But perhaps the most important question is not whether we can avoid this future, but whether we want to avoid it. Because it is possible that we are witnessing not a catastrophe, but an evolution. Perhaps the human capacity for autonomous decision-making has always been a temporary solution to problems that can now be solved in better ways. Perhaps freedom, in the traditional sense of individual autonomy, is a concept that made sense in contexts of information scarcity and limited resources, but that becomes obsolete in contexts of informational abundance and unlimited computational capacity. This perspective forces us to confront fundamental questions about what we really value in human experience. Do we value autonomy as an end in itself, or as a means to achieve well-being, satisfaction, personal growth? If external systems can provide us with more satisfying, more prosperous, safer lives than we could achieve on our own, what exactly is the problem with depending on them? Why insist on making choices for ourselves if those choices consistently lead us to worse outcomes than the choices optimized systems would make for us? These are questions that don't have easy answers, but that require urgent reflection, because the decisions we make today about how to interact with intelligent technology will determine what kind of human beings we become in the coming decades. And once certain capabilities are lost on a social scale, it may be impossible to recover them. Let's explore an even more subtle aspect of this transformation, how it affects our capacity to find meaning and purpose in life. For thousands of years, much of human meaning came from the need to overcome challenges, to grow through difficulties, to develop competencies through practice and failure. What happens when these challenges become unnecessary? When algorithms can solve most of the problems that give texture and depth to human experience? It's not just a question of having or not having work. It's a question of having or not having reasons to develop the capabilities that historically defined what it means to be human. This may be the most radical transformation. Not just changes in what we do, but changes in what we are capable of becoming. And it is happening not through authoritarian imposition, but through perfectly rational individual choices that, when added together, lead us to a collective destiny that perhaps no one has consciously chosen. If these reflections have touched on something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. By joining this community, you will connect with people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue about how to preserve our essential humanity while navigating an inevitable technological future. Subscribe to continue this crucial conversation about what it means to be human in an age when that very question is being redefined by forces we don't always fully understand. The question is not whether you will lose your job and your freedom. The question is whether you will notice when it happens and whether it will still matter when you do notice. Because perhaps in the end, we discover that what we thought was freedom was just a necessary illusion for a specific phase of human evolution. And perhaps what we are losing is not our humanity, but just a particular version of it that has already fulfilled its historical purpose. The future will tell us if we made the right choices. But we need to make these choices now while we are still the ones choosing.
Writing history is somewhere in between kind of science and art. To write a history book, it's not an equation. You need to tell stories. So I also, to some extent, I see myself as an artist. And I don't know if I'll still be writing books in 5 years or 10 years, because maybe by the 2030s, AIs will write books like Sapiens and Nexus so much better than me that it will be kind of almost meaningless for a human being to engage in that. The amount of information that I can gather is infinitesimal compared to the AI. Yeah. I've already seen, these wonderful stories written by AI, and I agree that humans will always want to create for the joy of creating, as children do. But would it still be valued? Until today, it's not just that we liked doing it, it was extremely valuable. Nothing on planet Earth could be as creative as us. And now in more and more fields, there is something.
So you are a military, you studied the military history of the Middle East. Did you ever expect to now be the foremost expert on all things AI and whether we are doomed as humanity?
I'm not the foremost expert, but I didn't expect to be talking about AI with such an audience. As you said, I was originally a specialist in medieval military history, and but the Middle Ages are coming back. in many ways.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get into that. And then feel free to get into that as I ask you this first question. You call artificial intelligence, or alien intelligence as you refer to it throughout your writing, the rise of a new species that could replace Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Sapiens, your prior book. What does it mean to be human right now?
To be aware that for the first time we have real competition on the planet. That we have been the most intelligent species by far for tens of thousands of years. And this is how we got from being an insignificant ape in a corner of Africa to being the absolute rulers of the planet and of the ecosystem. And now we are creating something that could compete with us in the very near future. The most important thing to know about AI is that it is not a tool like all previous human inventions. It is an agent. An agent in the sense that it can make decisions independently of us. It can invent new ideas. It can learn and change by itself. All previous human inventions, whether a printing press or the atom bomb, they are tools that empower us.
They needed us.
They need us because a printing press cannot write books by itself, and it cannot decide which books to print. An atom bomb cannot invent the next more powerful bomb, and an atom bomb cannot decide what to attack. An AI weapon can decide by itself which target to attack and design the next generation of weapons by itself.
So this is why you argue that AI is potentially, or it sounds like you're saying is, by the way now, but you've written in the past, potentially more momentous in the invention of the telegraph, the printing press, even writing. But the way you talk about it in Nexus is that it is a baby.
Yeah.
Because it learns from us. And therefore, your argument is that we, especially the powerful leaders in this room, have a lot of responsibility because how we act is how AI will be. You cannot expect to lie and cheat and have benevolent AI.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, there is a big discussion around the world about AI alignment. Okay, we are creating these increasingly super intelligent, very powerful new agents. How do we make sure that these agents remain aligned with human goals and with the benefit of humanity, that they do what is good for us? And so there is a lot of research and a lot of efforts focused on the idea that if we can design these AIs in a certain way, if we can teach them certain principles, if we can code into them certain goals, then we will be safe. But there are two main problems with this approach. First of all, again, the very definition of AI is that it can learn and change by itself. If you have a machine that can act automatically, but only following pre-programmed orders, then, it's a coffee machine. It can do something automatically, produce coffee, but it cannot decide or invent anything by itself. It's not an AI. So when you design an AI, by definition, this thing is going to do all kinds of things which you cannot anticipate. If you can anticipate everything it will do, it is by definition not an AI. So that's one problem. The other even bigger problem, that we can think about AI, like you said, like a baby or a child. And you can educate a child to the best of your ability, and he or she will still surprise you, for better or worse. No matter how much you invest in their education, they are independent agents. They might eventually do something which will surprise you and even horrify you. The other thing is, everybody who has any knowledge of education knows that in the education of children, it matters far less what you tell them
than what you do.
It matters far more what you do.
Yeah.
If you tell your kids, don't lie, and your kids watch you lying to other people, they will copy your behavior, not your instructions. Now, if we have now these big projects to educate
the AIs not to lie. But the AIs are given access to the world, and they watch how humans behave, and they see some of the most powerful humans on the planet, including their parents, lying. The AI will copy the behavior. People who think that I can run, say, this huge AI corporation, and while I'm lying, I will teach my AIs not to lie, it will not work. It will copy your behavior.
One of your central arguments is that we as society writ large have focused way too much on power. And you also make the argument that some disagree with or would call counterintuitive, that more information is great for democracies because you say all information is not true information, et cetera.
Most information is not the truth.
Right.
There's a huge confusion between information and truth. Yeah. Yes, some information is true, and you need information to get to know the truth, but generally, the truth is a very, very small subset of most of the information in the universe.
So if we are focusing too much on power, and that's a very important distinction, you say this is why we have failed as people largely to answer actually the biggest questions of life. If we can be more productive, we can be richer, we can have stronger militaries. But many of us can't answer the question, as you write, who are we? What should we aspire to? And what is a good life? Essentially, we are accumulating power, not wisdom.
Yeah.
How can we change it?
And that's the big problem of human history, for thousands of years. We are extremely good in acquiring more power. Again, this is how we transform ourselves from an insignificant ape in East Africa into the ruler of the world. We can fly to the moon, we can split the atom. But we don't seem to be significantly happier than we were in the Stone Age. We don't know how to translate power into happiness. Again, you look at the most powerful people on the planet, they don't seem to be the happiest people on the planet. So there is a very...
Do you want to ask them? There are many of them.
I'm not necessarily referring to the people in this room. I want to clarify, I don't think there is a contradiction between power and happiness. I don't think that as you acquire more power, you necessarily become miserable. No. But it can go together, but it doesn't necessarily go together. And as a species, we have not been particularly good in translating power into happiness or even into knowledge and wisdom. Again, we tend to confuse intelligence with knowledge and with truth. But we are the most intelligent species on the planet. We are also the most delusional species on the planet.
And destructive, you argue.
And self-destructive, yeah. The kind of things that people believe, no other animal on the planet will believe such nonsense.
Like?
Except, if I look at my own country, like, you would not find any animal that believes that if you go and kill other members of your species, you will be rewarded after death by entering paradise. No chimpanzee will believe that. No horse would believe that. No wolf will believe that. Millions of people believe that, and they believe it so strongly that they actually go and kill people in the expectation that as a result, they will be rewarded in paradise with whatever. We took a really interesting poll this morning asking the leaders in this room how consequential they think AI has been so far in their business. And actually only the businesses they lead, and only a small portion said significantly. Most it was moderately or not at all. Yeah.
Can you speak to them as if we were sitting here 36 months from now? Is there any world in which AI doesn't have a significant impact on their business?
It depends on their business, but in most fields, again, the question is one of time scale. I've been talking to a lot of the people who lead the AI revolution, and many of them say, we are already in the middle of the AI revolution, we still haven't seen anything really major. And that's just the difference between how historians view time and how CEOs and entrepreneurs view time. For an entrepreneur, 2 years is a long time. For historians, it's nothing. It's like, imagine that we are now sitting in London
and the year is 1835. The first railway has been opened between Manchester and Liverpool 5 years ago. And we have now this conference in London in 1835, and people saying, you know, all this talk about railways changing the world, the Industrial Revolution, this is nonsense. We have had railways for ages, 5 years. And look, okay, so there is some changes that they now have people traveling with the trains, or they move around coal more easily. But nothing major happened. Because there is a time lag between the invention of a technology and the moment when you see the actual social and political consequences.
Yeah.
So we now know that the Industrial Revolution and trains, they completely transformed everything. Geopolitics, the way people fight wars, the economy, family structure, but it just took more than 5 years. The same is likely to happen with AI. In all fields, from the obvious to the less obvious, like I think that one of the first fields we'll see major changes is finance.
Okay.
That AI is going very quickly to take over the financial system.
We have some bankers in the room, so tell us more.
Because finance is the ideal playing ground for AI. It's purely an informational realm. If you want to have an AI self-driving vehicle on the road, which has been promised again and again, and we are still not there, the problem...
Waymo.
Yeah, but you go around London, you don't see these tens of thousands of self-driving vehicles yet. I just passed my first driving lesson
Congratulations.
here in the UK, and you still need to learn how to drive.
Okay.
So
but
the problem is that for driving, you need to deal with the messy physical world of pedestrians and holes in the roads and whatever. But in finance, it's only information in, information out. It's much easier for an AI to master that. And what happens to finance once AIs, for instance, start inventing new financial devices that the human brain is simply incapable of dealing with because it's mathematically too complex? We are going to see AI changing even things like religion.
How?
At least religions which are based on texts, like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they give ultimate authority to the text, not to any human being. Now, until today, humans were nevertheless the main authority in these religions because the texts could not speak. The Bible could not interpret itself. The Bible could not answer your questions, so you needed a human being as an intermediary. What happens when you have an AI text that can speak for itself? No Jewish rabbi can know all the texts of Judaism because there are too many of them. For the first time in history, there is something on the planet that is able to remember every single word in every writing of every rabbi in the last 2,000 years and talk back to you and explain and defend its views. So I have friends who are now working on building religious AIs that are meant to either augment or replace human religious leaders, especially in text-based religions. If the religion is not based on texts, it doesn't give authority to a text, it's a different story.
Okay, but I go, and we're going to questions next. I'm going to come first to Mattia Moore if you want to raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone. But I go and talk to my pastor at our church when I am going through a difficult time. I am never going to talk to ChatGPT like that.
But it's an individual choice.
So you think some will?
I know that already millions of people do it. I mean, I know people who go for now AIs to get psychological counseling.
Yes.
That AI is their best friend, like teenagers. Something happened in school, they tell the AI what happened and ask for advice about relationships.
So let me get back to, and then the question is next, let me get back to what you said, though, about replacing jobs. This is really important, and you write and talk a lot about what you're worried about, what it becomes a useless class. That's what you've talked about. And it was 5 or 6 years ago, I interviewed Google CEO Sundar Pichai in Oklahoma in one of their data centers. We need many, many more of them now to power AI. And I remember asking him about AI. People were talking about it a lot then, and he essentially told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if AI proves to be, quote, in his words, very disruptive to too many American jobs, he essentially said they would be open to slowing it down. Okay. I'm talking about this, not just Google, just writ large, these companies right now. If we are headed for what you're talking about, a potential useless class, many, interestingly, white-collar jobs, so it's getting a little bit more attention, perhaps, than when it replaced blue-collar jobs, which is a whole issue in and of itself. What do we do to make sure we as a society not only survive, but thrive?
I want to emphasize that AI has enormous positive potential as well as dangerous potential. And I don't believe in historical or in technological determinism. You can use the same technology to create completely different kinds of societies. We saw it in the 20th century that you used exactly the same technology to build communist totalitarian regimes and liberal democracies.
That's right.
It's the same with AI. We have a lot of choices about what to do with it, if, again, provided we remember that for the first time we are dealing with agents and not tools. So it makes it much more complicated. But we do have still, most of the agency is in our hands. And the question of how we develop the technology, and even more importantly, how we deploy it, we can make a lot of choices there.
We have agency in how we move forward. We don't have a choice that it has come.
Yeah.
We have power in how we use it and go through it.
Absolutely. The main problem is that now the companies and countries that lead the AI revolution has been locked into an arms race situation. So even if they know that it would be better to slow down, to invest more in safety, to be careful about this or that potential development, they are constantly afraid that if we slow down and they don't slow down, they will take over the world.
So let's get to some questions here. Mattia Moore with Emotion Network. Hi, yes, right here.
Hi, so congratulations, because I mean your books are really eye-opening, and so you gave already a lot of answers through your books and also today. We as a company, we have a conference called Tech Emotion because we strongly believe in the power of mixing technology and innovation with emotion, creativity, and culture. But and in what you're saying, this is a lot of a mix of this. So what I think it's really interesting what you are saying about also the effect on religion, the effect on the soul of the people, and this is also related to what she was saying about the purpose of the life of the people that is going to be destroyed or changed a lot by AI, by all these innovations. So how do you think it's possible to get a future where people is going to be more satisfied and more happy and also find more purpose in what they do with the difficulties that this world is changing? So I know this is a big question, but I think that is the most important thing in our life, much more than business, but more than anything else.
Yeah, so it's a very big subject. The most important thing, I only have time to talk about one thing, so the most important thing is that we need to solve our own human problems instead of relying on the AI to do it for us. And the key problem is the problem of trust and cooperation. At the present moment, trust is collapsing all over the world, both between countries and within societies. And the hope that, okay, humans can no longer trust each other, so the international system and the trade system and everything is collapsing, but the AI will save us, no, it will not. In a world in which humans compete with each other ferociously and cannot trust each other, the AI produced by such a world will be a ferocious, competitive, untrustworthy AI. It's not possible for humans, as they engaged in this ferocious competition, to create benevolent, trustworthy AI. It will just not happen. So if you think about it, it's just a question of priority. We have now this big human trust problem, and we have the issue, how do we develop AI? Too many people think, okay, let's first solve the how do we develop AI problem, and then this will solve the human trust problem. It will not work. We need to get our priorities the other way. First solve the human trust problem, then together we can create benevolent AI. Of course, this is not what is happening right now in the world.
Do we have one more? Yes, right here.
Thanks very much, Yuval. Quick question from me. So, in human history, there's been organizing principles, and you write about that so much in your books. And there's been, in some senses, at least geographically, monolithic organizing principles, like religion and the church was one of those. But when we talk about AI, we're not talking about something that is monolithic, right? There is no the AI. This is really effectively going to be multiple plethoras of AIs manifesting themselves.
Absolutely.
And in that context, when you describe AI replacing religion in some sense, I think the real question for me is, when you have no single organizing principle, there is no the AI that gets developed with any kind of intent, whether that intent is benevolent or otherwise, and there's all of these competing AIs that are effectively evolving fast, what does that world look like?
That's a very, very important point. I mean, the AI will not be one big AI. We are talking about potentially millions or billions of new AI agents with different characteristics, again, produced by different companies, different countries, everywhere. In the military, in the financial system, in the religious system. So you'll have a lot of religious AIs competing with each other. Which AI will be the authoritative AI rabbi for which currents of Judaism? And the same in Islam, and the same in Hinduism, and in Buddhism, and so forth. So you will have competition there. And in the financial system. And we just have no idea what the outcome will be. We have thousands of years of experience with human societies. What happens when millions of humans compete for economic power, for religious authority? It's very complex, but we at least have some experience in how these things develop. We have zero experience in what happens in AI societies when millions of AIs compete with each other. We just don't know. Now, this is not something you can simulate in the AI labs. If OpenAI, for instance, wants to check the safety or the potential outcome of its latest AI model, it cannot simulate history in a laboratory. It can check for all kinds of failures in the system, but it cannot tell in advance what happens when you have millions of copies of these AIs in the big world outside, developing in unanticipated ways, interacting with each other and with billions of human beings. So it's in a way, it's the biggest social experiment in human history. We are all part of it, and nobody has any idea how it will develop. One analogy to keep in mind, we now have this immigration crisis in the US, in Europe, elsewhere. Lots of people worried about immigrants. Why are people worried about immigrants? There are three main things that come to people's mind. They will take our jobs. They come with different cultural ideas. They will change our culture. They may have political agendas. They might try to take over the country politically. These are the three main things that people keep coming back to. Now, you can think about the AI revolution as simply a wave of immigration of millions and billions of AI immigrants that will take people's jobs, that have very different cultural ideas, and that might try to gain some kind of political power. And these AI immigrants, these digital immigrants, they don't need visas. They don't cross the sea in some rickety boat in the middle of the night. They come at the speed of light. And I look, for instance, at far-right parties in Europe. And they talk so much about the human immigrants, sometimes with justification, sometimes without justification. They don't talk almost at all about the wave of digital immigrants that is coming into Europe. And I think they should be much, if they care about the sovereignty of their country, if they care about the economic and cultural future of their country, they should be far more worried about the digital immigrants than about the human immigrants.
Yuval, this has been remarkable. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very, very much. I'll see you after.
I love to consider myself a storyteller. As an actor and a filmmaker, it's something that I think of as more than a job. I connect to it on maybe an existential level, on who I am. And one thing I often like to say even is that storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human. So as an expert on the history and the prehistory of what humans are, I'm curious to hear what you think of that statement. If I say storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
this is the this is the source of our power. We control the world because we can cooperate in much larger numbers than any other animal. And the secret of cooperation of humans is stories. I mean, you can't get to know more than 100 or 200 individuals, but the same story can be known to millions and even billions of people. And as long as everybody believes the same story, they can cooperate. They can agree on norms and values and so forth.